Hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm really excited today. We're going to be introducing a lot of very cool, very brand new stuff. We have with us today our founder and CEO, Bryant Cruz. He'll be going through a presentation and a brand new demo, and then we'll leave the floor open for questions. So during the demo, if you have any questions, comments, please leave them in the chat. We will get to them at the end of the Q&A. We also want to tell you that this will be a recorded webinar. So if you do have to leave at the end for any reason, we will make sure that that link is sent out to you. But we're really excited for today because what we've accomplished is called Bloom's Taxonomy Level 3. This is the first time ever in the history of humanity that Bloom's Taxonomy Level 3 has been achieved in a machine. So this is a very historic moment, and we're absolutely excited. Now, if you don't know what Bloom's taxonomy is, do not worry. We have a very in-depth presentation to go through exactly what it is and how New Sapiens is the only company able to achieve this. So without further ado, lots of really good stuff to get into today. Brian, please.
Thank you, Ayush. I do have a few slides to introduce the idea of Bloom's taxonomy to you, and then we'll get into talking, have a little conversation with one of our sapiens to demonstrate what we're talking about. So to begin, I have to share a screen. As you know, what we created at New Sapiens, well, I think you know, if you're here, you probably do, and you've looked at some of our material. We have created a lot of documentation material, papers, things like that, so people can read and investors can do diligence, understand what we are, because we are not the same as everybody else. The fundamental technology is a way of putting knowledge, which is a model of the world. It's just not data or information. It's something very unique and specific. We found a way to create that, to synthesize it into a computable form, extremely compact form, and insert it into a computer. Now, so that makes it possible to program computers not just with data and information, but for the first time with knowledge. In general, that is our technology, and we have a platform today upon which we can build products. And the first product that we're building, the first application, is an AI that understands natural human language and that you can talk to in your own language and it can talk back to you in your own language, not simulate it, not apparent, not generate text that it doesn't know what it means, but truly a conversation, which when you get one of these things in your hands, you will have no doubt that it truly does understand you. So, but today's demonstration is about language comprehension, or maybe broadly, comprehension in general. What does it mean to comprehend something in the world? So Bloom's taxonomy of learning, we're going to demonstrate, as you said, level 3, there's 6 levels. And then we're going to take, at the end, we're going to just have a few words to compare the scalability of our approach with what's going on with other approaches to AI, namely today, LLMs, machine learning. So we're talking about learning here, Bloom's taxonomy, it's what we call cognitive learning, as opposed to neural learning. Machine learning, as we understand it, LLMs or other machine learning applications based on artificial neural networks, do what we call neural learning. Neural learning is like what you do, what humans do it, like when you learn how to shoot a bow and arrow or ride a bike, you burn in neural pathways, that's neural learning. Cognitive learning is what you do when you go to school and you learn about you learn ideas and you learn about the world and you increase your model of the world. And of course, ChatGPT, those things they don't do cognitive learning. They don't have anything that looks like cognitions inside. They just do statistical patterns of ones and zeros. But the interesting thing about Bloom's taxonomy, it wasn't done as an AI assessment tool. It was done as a tool for human students. And this is that teachers study this taxonomy, if it is a taxonomy. Taxonomy of Educational Objectives was the original paper by Bloom in 1973. And he identified 6 levels of increasingly sophisticated comprehension and cognitive learning that humans do or strive to achieve in the educational process. And these levels are not really precisely defined for human beings. And the way Bloom did it was by for each one, he gave a name, and then he gives a bunch of words associated with that sort of a list of words. That if you read all those and kind of put them all together and roll them all up into sort of a fuzzy thing, you kind of get a notion of what those are. But we found them to be very helpful and map very nicely into what we are doing with Sapiens, and as we push them into successively more sophisticated and powerful types of comprehension and learning. So they were revised in 2000, different names. But what we found that's so interesting as we've applied them to Sapiens development, we found that we're actually bringing much more precise notions than these vague associations with these words. Of course, words associate with ideas, and we're all about going not to the word, but to the idea associated with the word, or which the word is an arbitrary symbol for, and trying to think about what is underneath there. What are the concepts? So in this case, all these words, define, repeat, record, list, recall, what do they point to? What are the concepts they point to? And what are the core concepts among them, and how do they relate to each other? And that's very, very interesting, because what we're finding out to bring these concepts into focus for machines is probably going to be helpful going back the other way someday. Level one, basically, it just shows that you remember what you were told, just recall and kind of give it back what you were told, and not necessarily leaving the realm of language or leaving the realm of what you were told, but kind of giving it back just the way you heard it. And so you're still very much immersed in language at level one. And for us, we actually do that by converting an English input statement into an internal structure of information in a directed graph structure, which we call the input graph or the language graph, in which the grammar and syntax and semantics of the original English statement are all preserved and captured and are now available to reason about. Now, at that level, you can use that to answer questions because you still have the words, you still have the grammar, and also you have the semantics. And the semantics, of course, are the relationship of the words or symbols in the sentence back to pre-existing ideas. If you don't have a separate set of pre-existing ideas, which are not words, you can never understand language. So we achieved that some time ago. The level two is when you reason about that input graph or that language graph, and you think about that, and you extract from it, and you treat the grammar and the syntax of the input sense, and you reason about them, in that you take the ideas that the semantics refer to back in your model, and then the grammar kind of tells you how to put them together to find out what they really mean, what you're really talking about. So at the level two, you leave language behind. You've taken the ideas out of your existing model and you've put them together in a new pattern. You don't need the old input graph anymore or the language input. So that's level two. If level one is understanding what a person says, level two is understanding what it meant. Level three is then taking what it meant and then reasoning about it to figure out, to refine what you just heard, define what you just learned, locate it better into the model, and to consider what effects that might be to understand it at a deeper level. One of those things is auto classification, where you are able to deduce what something is with, even though you have an incomplete knowledge about it, you're able to accurately figure out what it is based on the knowledge of generally how you tell one thing from another in a more general way. And those kind of considerations are what we're putting into our world model. Level four, analyzing. Analyzing allows you to backtrack when we reason about something, when we create a knowledge graph, when we apply that knowledge graph. If you can then have the capability to go back and backtrack through that to analyze why you came up with that, and to understand that underlying causes and hidden meanings of things. For instance, if you could answer a complex question like, why did Queen Clytemnestra kill King Agamemnon? You'd have to go back all the way through the different actions and understand all the way back to the first principle that started the ball rolling there. That's level 5. That's analysis. Level 5 is synthesis, is creating new ideas. It's kind of like creativity. And this is done by, as we understand it, by you look through your model and you find patterns of pre-existing properties, attributes of things that maybe you didn't know were there initially. You put two things together, you model them, and then you have an algorithm comes behind the fact and looks for things that look the same. Leonardo da Vinci was famous for being the first to observe that the pattern of streams in a river delta was virtually identical to the pattern of capillaries in a human lung. That's synthesis. And finally, what you might call level 5, sometimes called analyzing analysis. Oops, I'm sorry, I'm going the wrong way. Level 6, evaluation, creation. What we really see that it's really, we think a better word might have been discernment. That's when you have, not only do you have a model of the world, but you understand that different people have different models of the world. And some models are better for one thing, and some models for other things, that there are in fact different kinds of knowledge. So you have to have knowledge, meta-knowledge, knowledge about knowledge. And I think in humans, the most common things, you have judgment. You can evaluate and critique uh, an idea or whatever, a theory, an ideology. That's level 6. Obviously, for 6, you need a very sophisticated model. For level 5, also pretty complete model. We'll be I think, getting close to level 4 pretty soon. We're already penetrating level 3, as you'll see next.
And now we're going to be going to the demo.
So, as I said, our first ah, our first application for synthetic knowledge is uh, AIs that can speak English, other languages to follow. And I just started a little conversation with Helen. I just created Helen 5 minutes before we started the meeting. And so she's just been born, it's just been born, but it has all the knowledge that we've been working on in our core world model. It has basically about 3,000 or a little more than that in terms of modeled concepts. Some of these are very esoteric, what we call the cognitive core, their epistemological knowledge and ontological things like that, kind of the things that connect our directed graph together, kind of the connective tissue of the model. But a lot of them are everyday things. So I'm going to start by, because it's getting impatient. I'm going to ask it a question. What is a crane? So I happen to know that it doesn't know what a crane is, but I'm just demonstrating that. Because when it has actual knowledge of things, obviously it doesn't know everything, but if it knows what it knows, it obviously knows what it doesn't know. And that itself is useful information. One of the problems with LLMs and chatbots today is that they don't know anything. They don't know, so they answer everything with complete sounding, very confident sounding language, and people, people fall for it. So cranes catch fish by the shore. So let's see where that is with respect to Bloom's taxonomy 1 and 2. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to open up that sentence, and I'm going to have to expand that so you can see it. I'm sorry, the font gets pretty small when you do that. So I'll talk you through it. The easiest way to see what we've got here. Remember I said we have language graphs, that's Bloom's taxonomy level 1, and then knowledge graphs, which is Bloom's taxonomy level 2. Let's look at what level 1 looks like. You can look at all that again, the font's real small, or we can look at a graphical representation of it. That's what this machine created. That's what I saw what happened we're looking inside of Helen's mind, if you will. And if you look at, you can't see these things, but you see, I can read some of them to you. They've got all kinds of both grammatical information here, but there are also semantic references back to things in the model. So there's a reference here generating back to the model of catching. There is over here. There's a instance of the sapiens. If I expanded that, it would be Helen. Over there, there's the speaker, or which if I opened that up, you'd find it was me, speaker, generated person. If I expanded that, you would eventually find it has my name associated with it. So that's what the person said, and all the information that you could derive from that is here, and it's referenced back to the model with these things. It's created instances where it needs instances. So this is the input graph, and you could reason about this, and you could answer questions about this. All the information is there. You could ask a question about what you could know about what a about, in this case, the input, which was Crane. So let's go back and then look at, that was Bloom's taxonomy level 1 in a very visceral, engineering, precise way. Let's go back here. Now this is the knowledge graph. This is what we reasoned about, and this is what we were able to put together. This is the true comprehension of the English. We went from Bloom's taxonomy 1 to create the language graph, and then we reasoned about that, and we created what we call the knowledge graph. There's no language here anymore. All the linguistic things are gone. So we have, in this case, what we call an instance of the action of catching with the object of fish. It's an instance of fish. We have an instance of shore, and we have a relationship to this instance back to its parent class, which is the more general idea of catching. And then we have the thing which is the subject of the action. If I expand this, I look around genus, and that's an animal. How did it know it's an animal? I didn't say it was an animal. I said it was. I said they catch fish. Well, if you saw the last demo, we demonstrated that there was a reasoning thing that if we model, let's say, an action, we also, to completely model an action, you have to specify in terms of the model what things in that model could possibly perform that action, and what can the action be performed upon. And we reason about that, and we can use them to reason about unknown things. So in this case, it's reasoned that a crane is an animal by the fact that it's catching things. And only animals can catch things in that sense that we modeled the word catch. So let's go back to the conversation and give it some more information. Now, the beauty of this, it didn't know what a crane was, but it created a subclass of animal called crane. And it knows, all it knows about them is they catch fish in shallow water, but it doesn't know anything else about them. However, it's there, it has that word. As people use that word again, as I did here, it'll relate it back. It learned the word, by the way, didn't know what the word was either. It created the word on the basis of it being used in that input. It created the word and pointing it back to the subclass of animal. And now I've told it has beaks and feathers. And even on the basis of what it learned before, it still doesn't necessarily know what kind of animal it is. But it can still answer questions about what it learned from the input. Cranes catch the fish by the shore. That's interesting. Let's go back to cranes catch fish by the shore. And let's look at the same knowledge graph now. Let's expand the subject object. And guess what? It's now a bird. This is auto classification. This is Bloom's taxonomy level 3. It narrowed it down as more information comes in. Let's look at another one. Let's do another bird. What is a kestrel? I don't know. Kestrels catch fish in deep water, which they do, compared to by the shoreline. I see. Give it more information. Kestrels have feathers. Okay. Let's get it. Now let's ask it another question. Do kestrels have beaks? Yes, they do. I didn't tell it kestrels had beaks. How does it know they have beaks? Because it's figured out they're birds. Because it figured out they were animals because they catch things. And it reasoned that when I told it they have feathers, they're an animal with feathers. And every animal that has feathers is a bird. Now, how did we capture that knowledge? I'm going to show you. I'm going into a different window, which is our model editor. This is the interface that we use to add new information to the model, other than talking. But in the end, it's understanding that most of the knowledge and the most precise knowledge that we teach Sapiens is knowledge that we put in through this process, through this editor, through this tool. So I'm just going to do a search. This is the model for bird. Helen was born with this model, 20 minutes ago. The graph structure is fairly complex. It's hard to see all that and what's all going on with that. But this is the cognitive chemistry we're talking about. This kind of structure, nodes connected with edges. That's the same data structure that chemical elements chemical materials have the same kind of stuff. DNA has the same kind of structure. This is probably the most compact way you can store information of any kind. Now we're looking at a picture of it here for the sake of humans, but that's why our technology is incredibly compact. We can take knowledge and we can squeeze it down into an incredibly compressed information structure. I don't want to call this a raw structure. But it's an easier way to see this is over here in a tabular format. So here's a bird. It has all of these edges coming off of it. Here is subclass of animal, which is its a genus parent, which we mean this is what it's a subclass of. So a bird is a subclass of an animal. But we also have put that this genus thing, subclass of animal, is also a member of two sets, edge sets, set A and set B. And we declare these sets A and B here to be diagnostic. If you're anybody who's a inverted bird sensor, bird watcher will know that bird watchers use that same term diagnostic to delineate properties that a bird has will unequivocally identify it as being the bird you're looking at, the species of bird you're looking at. And we're using it here in exactly the same sense, but it's really the software that does the work. So if you go in here, you go to beak, you'll see that it's in set B, feathers are in set A, and wing is in set B also. So set B, wings and beaks, any animal with, and the fact is that any animal with beaks and wings is a bird, unequivocally. And any animal with wings, I'm sorry, wings and beaks, that's set B, makes it a bird. But of course, if you don't have a beak, you could be a bat. All right. So, but any animal with feathers always is a bird. So two different patterns that you can specify. This knowledge is not hard to figure out. Everybody knows it. A child can figure this out. And we put it in here for, we put these diagnostic edge groups on all of the core concepts that we model. And that makes it really easy to figure out. And then the software does it automatically, just like people do it automatically. And that's really profound. We started with the word crane or kestrel that it didn't know. We used it in a sentence. It figured out it was an animal, learned a little bit about it. We gave it a bit more information and it automatically refined its understanding what it is, and we identified it back into the model. And of course, what one sapiens can learn, they can all learn. Why is this really profound? Well, human children are estimated at about the 5-year level, 4 to 5 years, to have a world model, if I might say, of about 2,500 concepts. And that's based on the kind of rough assumption that for every vocabulary word that they can be demonstrated to know, they have an idea that it points to. Okay. It's more complicated than that, but that's not wrong. A college graduate is understood or believed or have found to be in studies to have more like 30,000 words that they know, 30,000 ideas. Now, where did they get them? How did that growth come? How many of those concepts were taught explicitly by looking on a vocabulary test or explicitly looked up in a dictionary? Hardly any. All of that knowledge, all of that vocabulary, all of that world, all that knowledge about the world came from language, listening and speaking, whether in everyday context or in pedagogic environments. So we've already, when we put our Sapiens in your hands as a product, first time, perhaps in our companion Sapiens, it's just one of so many products that we see coming down the road from this. Just by talking to it, it will learn more and more and more knowledge. It's automatic. We don't have to do it. We don't have to put all that. We don't have to. English has over 1 million words. We're building a system based on this cognitive core and a vocabulary of a 5-year-old building something that can learn all those 1 million words through reading and conversation. That's amazing. What happens if I say a crane is also a machine, which I could do, but I want to leave more time for questions, but it can handle that too. Maybe in our next demonstration. Let's get back to my slides. So where are we today? We're right here. We're bumping up against 3. We have both these done kind of across the board. We're just getting into the application. We don't have it across the board. We have a lot more modeling. We have a lot more of those edge groups and other things that do support that. But there's many other examples of level 3. But that's the level where we're moving forward. analysis is coming, since they're all coming. And look at the shape of this curve. We're
We still have to
confident.
show the presentation, Brian.
Oh, thank you, Ayush.
I want to see the presentation as much as anybody.
All right, here's here's where we are today. Here's the Sapiens are 2025. We're bumping against level 3 of Bloom's taxonomy, and we have a very precise notion of what we mean by it. You just saw it in the case of auto classification. Look at the curve. It's an exponentially increasing curve. It's plotted linear time, exponential increase in performance. How do we know? We know it because there's something called the jigsaw puzzle effect. You've never heard of the jigsaw puzzle effect? That's because we made it up. We didn't really make it up. We just named it because everybody who's ever done a jigsaw puzzle already knows it's true. And what the effect is, the rate at which pieces are correctly located into the puzzle increases exponentially over time. You know how that works. You start off with a big pile of thing, you start doing the corners, you do the edges, you start putting in little pieces around it, nibble, nibble, nibble away at it, sort, sort, nibble. And then, but as you get more of the picture done and you have fewer pieces to sort, the faster it goes. What we did for those, going back to this one, what were we doing in these years before we even got into this? Well, we were defining the pieces, and the shapes, and what's the picture of the world look like, the ontological picture that we're modeling, which is reality. We had to invent new concepts in epistemology and ontology to do that and make them computable, and we succeeded. But now we're really on the road, and this is happening at an interesting time because machine learning has a curve too, but it's the opposite curve. Over time, for a given level of effort, you get less and less performance. And there was an article just on the 25th of April by journalist Will Lockett, who writes a lot about AI. I've read many of his articles, maybe you have too. He said AI, meaning LLMs and machine learning AI, is hitting a hard ceiling it can't pass. And he points out, or he claims, and I don't think it's really that controversial, but 90% of the improvement in LLM performance is because they've been trained on significantly larger data sets. And but you're seeing dramatically diminishing returns because they're running out of data and computer power. It's incredibly computationally hungry. And he actually tells you why. This is an important piece that I think a lot of people don't appreciate. LLMs have to compare each individual point of data to every other data point in the set to find the connections and trends that make it work. This means that for each bit of data you add to an AI training base, the amount of computational work it takes to train that AI on that database increases exponentially. And so we're seeing diminishing returns. They're already on the flat part of the curve. And we see that. I mean, GTP 3 was amazing, but it was hundreds of times bigger than GPT-2. I should have those statistics in front of me. GTP-4 was orders of magnitude bigger than 3, but still you can't trust the writer document without making mistakes. It's not getting that better, and they're running out of power, and they're running out of data, and they're running out of computers and data centers, and they're seriously talking about covering the planet in data centers and building nuclear reactors to power them. They're already on the flat part of the curve. The problems that are inherent in LLMs aren't going away. And I think that's really significant to us and to you as potential investors, because I think we're starting to see the vibe shift. Just this past week, I've seen really interest people reaching out to me from people who were in the traditional AI community. They're looking for something new because they're realizing that LLMs aren't going to become AGI. In fact, they aren't even going to get much better than they are now. And they're not that great now. I mean, they're intriguing and they have their place for summarizing documents or document generation, but only if you don't really care about accuracy. So we don't have any of these limitations. In fact, we have a virtuous curve, but they have a negative one. All right. Thank you. Appreciate your attention.
Everyone, if you can put your questions in the question box below, we'd be more than happy to answer them. We'll give Brian a little break from the incredible presentation and demo he was doing. So yeah, we'll take a couple of minutes get the questions in. Brian, we already have questions if you'd like to start the
Oh,
Q&A.
sure. Oh, sure. I gotta go split it. I'm good.
Fantastic. So people were asking during the crane demo, what if we ask it, how does it know that we're talking about a crane, the animal, versus crane, the machine? We touched on it, but I do want
Oh,
to ask that point blank. How do sapiens know we're talking about the animal and not the machine?
well, at that point, it didn't know what the word crane, it didn't even know the word crane. So I created the word crane, and I could go back in there right now and say, in fact, if I didn't want to take all the time playing with it, because I'm going to leave time for questions. We really didn't have enough time last time. If I said a crane is also a machine, it would create another um, reference for the word crane, this time pointing to crane the machine. So now the word crane would have two references. Okay. And so then if I came and said, but immediately after that, I would say, what is a crane? Instead of saying bird with feathers and a beak, it would say it's a machine. Now, if I got out of the comment, and the reason it would do that is because when I would say, what is a crane after that, since that was first question, I'm sorry, I didn't know what. What it does, it creates two branches because it creates two possible cranes, possible universes where you're talking. One is you're talking about the machine, and one in which you're talking about bird, and then it tries to resolve what you might mean. The first thing, if I came right back after and said a crane is machine, it would do what people would do. It said, well, the last thing you talked about was the machine. So if you come back and say just like a human would, I'm going to say it's the machine. But if you got out of the conversation and came back later and said, what is a crane? Again, it would, and in that case, by the way, it would go back and would say, because of the proximity in time, it would keep the one branch and throw out the bird branch. Now, if I come back the next day and without any context and said something like, there's a crane in the driveway, and without any context, I can't do anything context to figure out what I might mean. And so it would just come out and say, do you mean the bird or the machine? Now, later, which you'll see in subsequent demonstrations, I hope, if you stick around, um, and we do that before the campaign ends, we will demonstrate the very powerful context. So if you have any context at all, so if you're talking about, there's a bulldozer over there and there's a construction site going on, and then a crane's bringing in, a big load of lumber or something, but, and you say, what's a crane? It would say it's a machine for carrying heavy loads. Why? Because we've already established that we're talking about a construction, and we calculate all these little subcontexts because we talked about, you know, bulldozers, we talked about construction, we talked about so we established the construction context. And birds would be in the zoological context, whereas crane and machines would be in the construction context permanently. So we'll be able to resolve those things right off the top, in which case we won't even have to create those branches and save a lot of processing time.
So since crane hasn't been added into the model, one participant was asking, can we easily add tens of thousands or millions of words with meanings? And how do we add those words and those concepts into the model?
Well, there's two ways of teaching sapiens. One is through um, um, the editor, as I showed you, where you go in and you basically with a form and you say, I'm going to create a subclass of bird and I'm going to name it kestrel, and I can name all that. Now, as you just realized, you don't need to do that to millions of words, because it can learn on the fly. But in any case, what we'll do is we'll give it the basic vocabulary that it needs, and then we'll start to go into technical areas where you get deeper level knowledge with core concepts. A bird is a zoological. How deep do we want to go with birds? The point is, it's better to use our editor to give very precise, very carefully curated knowledge of birds than to learn through language. So it's not a matter of giving it tens and thousands of, of, of ideas through language. It's a matter of building them through our interface. Now, do you think, oh, but there's so many of them. But the point is, they're made out of common core ideas. You start with the core foundations. How many different materials are there in the material universe? Who knows? But they're all made out of the same 102 elements, right? Just a few common building blocks. So we put those in first, and then we put other things. And so it gets easier and easier to build complex ideas because we have underlying things that have already been sophisticated, modeled in a sophisticated way. It's compact. So on the cat, will we have to delineate every bone in a cat's body? No, we'll say it has a vertebrate skeleton, and up at the vertebrate class, we have the generic vertebrate skeleton, and the cat's just going to modify that a little bit. So it's really compact, and so as we model these things and more complex ideas, but all fit together in a compact way, it goes faster and faster. That's what I talk about, putting it together. If we wanted to go to the Library of Congress or any giant library, a compendium of knowledge, or imagine a library that had all the writing or all the books with which people have encoded knowledge in language. And we wanted to decode that knowledge back from language back into knowledge. Well, first you have to read the books. You have to get a bunch of people to read the books. You get experts who have read the books and are experts in those things, and you get them to sit down and say, teach these sapiens about what you know in the books that you read through our interface. So that's not the whole universe, but it's a part of it. Humans do that too. We specialize things because human brains, we have limited intellectual capacity. We also forget stuff. Sapiens don't. So the idea that we can get experts, authoritative experts, and curate all the expert knowledge. Right now, we're just doing common sense, everyday knowledge everybody agrees about. But we could curate expert knowledge. We could summarize in a very powerful way what great thinkers have had to say about things, and make that available. And so compact, it can be made available to anybody through their sapiens in the palm of their hands. It's a game-changing technology.
Speaking of the platform, we only interacted with the English language. How adaptable is our platform and our Sapiens to other languages? And is it a trivial task of, porting Sapiens to French, Spanish, and other languages as well?
Well, I wouldn't call it trivial, but it's very straightforward and very, very doable. And the beauty of that is all the power of this is in the core world model, in the knowledge we've built of the world at level 2 of Bloom's taxonomy. There's no language in there per se. It doesn't care whether you're speaking to it in German or in English. That's a translation layer. Now, in order to do that, we have to build a model of German or Farsi or whatever, which is basically a dictionary in a graph form. We have an English quote kind of a dictionary now. We will be expanding that dictionary not only in the number of words, but also be able to capture more information about words, such as things like connotations or, in what sense they may be used metaphorically, things like that. Right now, the Sapiens is very literal minded. So we have more work to do there. But the core thing is the model never changes. So we add another dictionary. Do we have to change the code? A little, some, because there's different, basically there's language you have to change, not at the input graph, the knowledge graph, but at the building the input graph, because different languages have different syntax, things like that. We also have a layer of the model, which is information about all languages. All languages have certain properties and characteristics. And, we have that layer too. And then you can add different languages as we get them done. And the beauty of it is that Sapiens are absolutely perfect translators because they can start with any input, go into the non-linguistic model of the world and the knowledge they have, and then they can articulate that in any output language with no losses, zero losses, except in the fact that there's always losses between one human being and a sapiens in, one human sapiens and one human being out. Just like, of course, when you have a human being, you get two losses.
And on this note, how do Sapiens talk to each other with language?
Well, they could, okay, because they understand language. But down the road, there'd be no need. Language is never perfect. It's an encoding and decoding process. It's never 100% accurate. Although it would be within Sapiens, but there's still no, even with Sapiens, there would be losses with their perfect memories. But they don't have to. And we haven't implemented it, but it's a much more powerful way. Sapiens could just cut off a whole piece of their graph structure and send it over an interface. So you get these guys, you get 10 the best PhDs in chemistry, and they create the chemistry extension to the general world model. Now, everybody maybe doesn't need their Sapiens to be PhD level chemistry. So you keep it up there on the new Sapiens store. And when you need it, you want to be a chemist or you want to do something clever with chemistry, you download it, and it downloads in 10 seconds. And now your Sapiens is a chemistry, has the knowledge of a human chemist PhD, and better because he never will forget any of it, and infinite capacity to add more knowledge. So there's not a human word for that. Well, humans can't do that. I guess the closest thing would be telepathy, but I don't even. It doesn't exist in humans. There's no correlation. By the way, neither does the process of curating knowledge with our tools and downloading it in a synthetic form into Sapiens minds when they wake up with it instantly when you turn them on, have any correlation to human knowledge or human learning. Divine revelation maybe would be the closest thought, maybe. But these are interesting things that we're creating. Very interesting beings.
Speaking of which, one participant was asking, at what level will our companion sapiens have the wow factor for release? So essentially, at what level are we going to put them into the public beta form and give them to people and actually be for anybody to use it and interact with it?
Well, here's the plan. Okay. The plan is we don't know, of course, because it's a subjective thing. But and we've raised the bar a little bit on that because it was easy for people to realize that sapiens were way smarter than Siri. But LLMs give an amazing illusion of understanding. But talking to a sapiens will be qualitatively different. It'll have a different feel to it. But we feel we have to get that model, which has been kind of roughed out. You saw Bird. Bird had a lot of stuff on it and had the edge groups, but most of the model doesn't have all that built out yet. Most of our actions don't even necessarily all the built out. We need those connection properties built out for every single node in there, and we need to add some more code to process them. It's not, how far away are we? Well, keep in mind that for the last 5 years, we had an average of 2 to 3 people working on this, and now we will have, and going forward from this time now forward, we'll have 15 to 20 people working on it. So I think it's going to come forward pretty quickly. So once we think that we are getting there and we are thinking this might be good enough, that's when we'll do an expanded beta test. And again, we had a run at this earlier. We weren't ready for it, in which we made a mistake by that, and we freely admit that. But this time we'll be ready, and we'll be able to ask people, talk to this thing, use it, tell it where you hide your spare keys and your passport, and and see if you find it truly useful. And when you say, I'd pay for this, I pay a couple dollars a month for this, we know we have a product. That's when we would go to a public beta and then to a product. Before then, there is, there's that point when we decide it's good enough to push out there. And then, of course, we'll get some feedback and we'll find out really quickly if we're right or not. And then somewhere beyond, I think beyond there, where it's not only interesting enough to use and test, and you can see its potential, whether we start to get a real wow factor. And that's what we call the tipping point, when it gets to a real wow factor. And
And one
then,
thing,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, that's when the doors really open to us, to institutional investors, Series A, and all that. And when that happens, by the way, the day of crowdfunding will be over, because and individual investors, small investors, don't get to participate in venture funds and things like that. That's why crowdfunding was invented. But crowdfunding you're only allowed to raise a limited amount of money. So when we hit that wow factor, and we can raise our current stock share from $6 to $40, and say our company is worth $1 billion, and of course it will be, then people who invest now at $6, their shares just jump to $40 a share. And there's ways of getting liquidity, even without going public. We're looking at something, there's something called a secondary offering, secondary markets out there, where companies that haven't gone public can nonetheless create a market for their shares, underwritten by certain, other companies that do these kinds of things. So that's another, if you ask, well, how am I going to get my money back if I invest today? That secondary market's a real possibility, or what we call a tender offer. So let's say I go to some big deal VCs after the wow factor has been established and people can't wait to get their hands on it and invest in it. They say, okay, yes, we're worth $1 billion. Of course we are. If Ilya Savetsky's Safe AI company is worth $34 billion and they don't have product or revenue, and they don't even, and they're trying to do it with LLMs and they've run out of data. Good luck to them if we're not worth that kind of ridiculous inflated thing. But yeah, $1 billion would be conservative. So $40 a share would be conservative for New Sapiens shares that you can buy today for $6. And but the other thing is we go and say, okay, how much money you want to put in? They say $100 million. We'll say, okay, but we don't, at $1 billion, that's only 10% of equity in the company. We can sustain that. It's not even going to get a sweat. We still have control of the company too, but which is a good thing. We don't really want the VCs to have control of the company because they own most of the shares. But anyway, we could say, okay, we're going to invest 50 million of that in expanding the company, and we're going to return the other 50 million of it back to our existing shareholders in what's called a tender offer. So we could go back to our older shareholders who've been around for a while, including people who come in now, and say, hey, you want to sell your shares at $40 a share? Go. Doesn't even require going public, doesn't require us getting acquired by Apple, which they'll offer.
What one participant was asking if we can explain what we mean when we say sapiens have reached level 3 of Bloom's taxonomy. Have they reached levels 1 and 2 across the board and we just reached level 3, or are we just in level 3 in this area and level 1 in other areas?
I
So
would
what does
say
it mean?
I would say we have 1 and 2 across the board, because we can convert the input English statement into a computable structure, which has all the information extracted from it. And you could use that structure, to mimic back or to give back, and all the things that they say about Bloom's taxonomy 1, rote memories, all that information is there. And we did write some code to do that. And it's pretty easy, but it lacks generality. So we're there, but we're not all across the board, because we never fail to make an input state structure, and we always make a knowledge structure. So that's really across the board. Even though we haven't built out all the things we're talking about, we have qualitatively across the board achieved that level. Level 3, not so much. We're just poking into that in some areas. I don't think autocomplete, which we just implemented, we probably have already achieved that in some other areas. I just haven't thought about it. But eventually, what we think with this model build out that we're setting our employees on now to make the entire existing model consistent and complete. And I've talked about, if you notice, I've talked about the analogy that we built a big 3,000 room skyscraper like the Empire State Building, but we haven't furnished the rooms yet, and so that's the next task we're working on, starting now with a much bigger staff. We know how to do it. We know what we need to say to each room, what has to go in it. But we've categorized them and classified them. So it's, once you figure that out, it's just pattern work to fill them out and flush them out. At the end of that, I think we will be level 3 across the board within the scope of the model we have. There's other knowledge out there that we haven't put in the model yet. We're working on the common sense model right now for language comprehension. From the standpoint of language comprehension, you can say we'll have reached level 3 across the board. Level 4 is farther down the road, and it's not. Most of our products don't need synthesis and analysis. That gets into more specialized use cases, and that will come along as we start to move into our commercial market verticals to build specialized sapiens and specialized models for space operations and banking and healthcare. And that will open the door to analysis and synthesis. Some of those will require it. Um, and then discernment, level 6. As we get down the road and sapiens have so much knowledge, and people rely on them more and more, we really do need to um, uh, do those kind of models, those meta models. In fact, I think we'll need to start doing that maybe sooner than later. We've actually got a hint of some of that right now. If you were here at the last demo, you saw we can already tell the difference between a subjective assessment and an objective fact. That's really level 6 stuff that is inherent in our model structure. That's true. It is level 6 stuff. So in all of this, as we could say, artificial general intelligence, I think you can make the case that we've already solved that qualitatively. But there's a quantitative thing until you can go out there. We have an artificial, we say we have an artificial intelligence. We've created an artificial intelligence right now. But I'd say, well, Helen has the intelligence of a Labrador retriever and the knowledge of a 3-year-old. But it's the real deal. It's just straightforward, doing what we know how to do.
And I do want to emphasize that we achieved level 3 in this way only 2 weeks after the last demo. So this is obviously something that we were working on, but this is a very new breakthrough and a very new thing. And I also want for you to say, Brian, have ChatGPT or Claude or Copilot or any LLM chatbot reached level 1 of Bloom's taxonomy?
It's apples and oranges. It's just apples and oranges. You can't do anything that way. I mean, unless you turn the whole thing inside out, which their apologists do. That's like saying, well, it got 800 on the law board, so it's smarter than a lawyer. It's not a lawyer. Being able to answer patterns input output questions doesn't make you a lawyer. It doesn't make you intelligent. So they don't. These are comprehension of language. Anybody who says that LLMs comprehend language, I'm sorry. That's not comprehension. Comprehension of language is being able to relate it to knowledge. And there's nothing inside of an LLM's memory that relates to knowledge in any way, shape, or form. Like you have these clouds of association with words. And it doesn't even know what the words mean. They're just patterns of ones and zeros. So and by the way, no other AI technology has really ever done that either. Again, because they weren't separating out the symbols from the knowledge, that they weren't separating the words and the language from the knowledge. If you can't comprehend language unless you leave it behind, and that requires a pre-existing information structure which contains a lot of information, not about language, but about the world, and separate from language. You've got to have that first. If you don't have that, none of the Bloom's taxonomy levels matter or apply or make any sense to try to apply. You're just being anthropomorphic if you try to apply, if you make that claim.
Well, everyone, this was a very jam-packed, very informational webinar. Uh, Thank you so much to you, Brian, for being there with the presentation and the webinar. We're always so excited and so happy to have someone like you being able to explain it, not with hype or jargonistic words, but just with first principles and grounded reasoning. We always appreciate that. Thank you to all of you for participating in the demo, for asking such great questions.
1 minute. I want to make one point about what you just said. We show a demo like this. Delve in, own the covers, look at that graph. You can always fake a demo. Okay. What I showed you is that when we say we're building, extracting information, creating these graph structures, today you saw it, you believe it, it's real. So that was important. The other thing is, we make progress all the time, but our investors need to see that. So I think it's worth taking the time to put together the demo, to show you what we're up to, and to answer your questions. And we want to keep doing that, but don't wait to invest.
And we are going to keep doing that. So obviously, everyone, we are in a Reg CF right now. You can check that out at investnow.newsapiens.com. We are participating in crowdfunding in order to raise funds to pay our very large staff now. to expand the model and get to that wow factor release sooner rather than later. And we are very close to that. If you did ask a question that wasn't answered, we do apologize, just the time constraints. You can email us at com.newsapiens.com. That is COMM at newsapiens.com. According to Regulation CF, we have to say that and not provide personal addresses for compliance reasons, but we would be more than happy to answer, address, and create a conversation about anything. So we want to thank you all once again.
Did you want to
Onwards and
mention
upwards.
about, did you want to mention about incentives expiring in a couple of days?
Yes, so right now, our bonus shares are expiring by July 2nd. And if you invest now, you do get bonus shares 25%. If you're already an existing investor, you get 50% bonus shares, and these shares do stack. So that's again investnow.newsapiens.com. We also have two brand new documents, Synthetic Intelligence 101 and the company, which go into far more detail about the investment opportunity and the technology as well. That is absolutely linked. And once again, this webinar is going to be recorded. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.